The last time I did a podcast from this spot, my dad, of all people, was chirping me about the background. He was kind of laughing. He's saying, "You're doing a hockey podcast and you got all this football stuff behind you." And he's not wrong. I mean, I got college football books and, a helmet. And I mean, I even got a baseball in the background there too. So, I mean, he's not wrong. So, took a page out of his book, took some advice. I got some hockey stuff. I figured I'd put on display here moving forward. Maybe a good little story here too. So my dad, myself, super sentimental, right? And this is kind of too funny. Um, this is the first point I ever recorded in a high school hockey game. My dad swiped the puck. This is an assist against Freeland, which is actually kind of ironic because I was talking about FNV and pumping their tires on last week's episode. So kind of funny that it kind of comes full circle there, and maybe a little feather in the cap there after like I said, pumping up the boys last week. So and then obviously first goal puck too. So I got both of those. Figured we prop those up on the bookshelf there. We'll add a little hockey to the backdrop here, and maybe as the season unfolds, we'll continue to add little bits and pieces. I know, Sean Belegian and the guys at State Champs did a nice job over the last couple of years with like the beanies and stuff like that. Maybe as we get going here, we can kind of come up with our own little shtick here for the podcast. So with all that, all right, well, let's get into it. Let's talk some hockey. First things first, did want to recap last week a little bit. This is why I was kind of hesitant to do some of this content, the previews and looking ahead to what the high school hockey season may hold, what players are coming in, what the conference dynamic might look like. I was a little hesitant to do that. After hitting publish on a lot of stuff last week, I was getting some DMs and feedback. Hey, this player has moved on. He's going and playing AAA this year. I even had a coach reach out. Hey, I'm not actually with that program anymore. I'm with a different program. So, the journalist in me, the reporter in me wants to get things right in that regard. I don't want to be putting out misinformation and things like that. So that bothers me, eats at me a little bit. But on the flip side, the positive of it is we're having these discussions and those conversations are being had. And, as long as those, I'll call it a mistake, as long as some of that stuff is, not done in jest and there's obviously no ill will to it. But even when I am wrong, I hope that, I get those DMs and people correct me and let me know so that we can more accurately, do things moving forward. So like I said, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I don't want to put out the wrong stuff, but I also want to get content out there that people can enjoy and consume and start to get excited about, what players to watch, what teams to pay attention to, start making some of those preseason picks. So, like I said, kind of that double-edged sword. So be it. Anyways, a lot to talk about on this episode here. I did want to mention the MDHL showcase is actually Wednesday, which at the time I'm recording this will be this time tomorrow night. I'm planning on, I'll be there breaking down, watching players. I'm hoping to have a kind of full recap of the day's events. So with that, I think you might get a double dose of the PD's Picks podcast this week. Maybe Thursday, Friday, we'll do another bonus episode where we talk strictly MDHL, top players, kids from the showcase, who to watch, who to pay attention to, and who's ripe for a big year. So look forward to that later on this week. If you're not following me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, make sure you are, because obviously I'll let everybody know if and when that MDHL episode is happening. And then also, I was diving into the analytics here on YouTube. 86% of you watching this video right now are not subscribed to the YouTube channel, and I just can't have that, people. So if you're watching this, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, you name it, right? Like, if you are a fan of the episode, if you're paying attention, right, be sure to smash that subscribe button. It's greatly appreciated. And like I said, when we do some of those bonus episodes, it'll obviously keep you up to date on all of that as well. So over the weekend, I did notice a couple games I wanted to highlight, just kind of scoreboard watching more or less. But 18U Little Caesars beat Big B in a pair of close games. I want to say one of them was like an overtime thriller shootout. However, they kind of determine their tiebreakers at the end of regulation. But so a couple close games there. Caesars, Big B actually had them at or near the top of the 18U rankings there. So that kind of checks out, right? A super close game between two of the predominantly better 18U teams in the state. Another matchup, again, just kind of scoreboard watching. I was looking at the box score. It didn't have a ton of information in terms of players and who actually scored the goal, or who was in net and things like that. But 16U Fox Motors with a big upset, 1-0 over VH. Obviously, if you guys have been listening to any of the episodes, watching any of the episodes, I've been very high on 07 VH and how they're my pick, anyways, my prediction to be the number one team in the state at that birth year. You've also heard me talk a lot about Fox Motors too, and how that program as a whole rarely has the most talent going into a lot of these matchups, but is extremely well coached, very disciplined across the board, not just at a specific age group, but from 18U down to 14s. Very well coached, very competitive on a game in, game out basis. So to see them kind of gut out, grit, get that gritty, scrappy 1-0 win over obviously the top team in the state, I'm not all that surprised by it, right? VH, obviously a ton of skill, ton of talent there, and will continue to go on and have a ton of success this season. But Fox Motors, like I said, that's a very on-brand win for them, and not surprised in the least. They've got some top players as well. Let's not get it twisted either. I mean, Travis Lafleur is a special player for them and really does it all. I wouldn't even be surprised if he was the one who scored that lone goal for them in that 1-0 win. So, or at least had a hand in it. So, so big upset there. Definitely something to pay attention to. I do need to, this is a bit of a fault of mine. I do need to update the rankings on the website. I'll get to that. And again, that's why I really strongly urge you guys to follow me on any of the social media platforms, because when that stuff gets updated, I'll obviously let you know. So need to update the rankings there again, based off of a lot of the game results and things that are going on here in real time. So, okay, let's move on to some conference talk. Let's get into, the 10-minute talks, right? What I kind of labeled them last week. We'll get into it here. I did, as I was kind of listening back and editing last week's episode, you couldn't really hear the alarm going off. I did set the timer, and the alarm obviously was interrupting me, cutting me off. I don't know that translated so well into last week's episode. So I'll try to move that. I'll keep my phone a little bit closer to the computer microphone here so that it gets picked up in the post-production, so to speak. So, okay, 10 minutes on the timer, ready to go and start. So I'm going to start with the SEC. We're going to get to the South Central Hockey League, Oakland Activities Association, OAA, as well. But set the tone here with the SEC. 9 teams in the conference, split up into 2 divisions. Those are lopsided divisions. Hasn't quite been ironed out yet. Pinckney merged with Walled Lake Western, I believe, and that took them out of the SEC and into the Lakes Valley Conference, which we talked about on last week's episode. So 9 teams in total. There is no clear-cut conference champ. They award division 2 division champs, the white division and the red division, and no kind of concrete crossover or conference champion. I will say Saline, the white division champ, and Chelsea, the red division champ, went head-to-head last year. Saline won that head-to-head matchup 5-4. So if you want to say there's de facto conference champ, you'd be looking at the Hornets for sure there. Let's see. I do think those two division champs continue to kind of separate themselves from the pack here as we continue to move forward. Saline returns a ton up front, including their top two leading scorers from a season ago. As I've looked through some of these teams, now through 6 conferences, we're looking at maybe half the state already. Very few, if any, are returning their top scorer, let alone their top 2 scorers. And the Hornets obviously have that luxury there with Mateo Idapalo and Blake Woodrell. Not to mention, on top of all that, you still get a 2-year starting goalie back as well in Tyler Schroeder. So that's huge. And then there's a ton of depth up front that I like a bunch. Antonio Giacalone and Aiden Rumer are both returners as well. That provides, a good 4, 5, 6 forwards returning from a year ago. So really impressive bunch there that obviously has a ton of potential to do some damage. On the other side of the conference, the other division, Chelsea, I think everyone statewide knows that they've lost Jack Roberts, Devin McIntyre, obviously to graduation. And that leaves a huge void for the Bulldogs to fill. And my knee-jerk reaction was going to be that it was just going to be too much for them to overcome. Like, those were, could we say, like, generational talents? Like, they were special talents in the high school hockey space, junior caliber players. And so to lose them, it's almost impossible to replace. However, I do kind of got to tip my cap because they do get Brendan Davila and Keegan Montgomery back. Keegan Montgomery back. Those are 2 big pieces up front. I don't expect them to fully replace or replicate what Roberts and McIntyre did from a year ago, but it is still a nice pieces to kind of fill that void. And then plus, I'm going to talk about returning goaltenders a bunch, I think, in these conference previews, because it's the ultimate, like, ace up your sleeve, a real great piece to have in your back pocket. Luke Webster was a sophomore last year, went 15-3-0 as a starter. And so whenever you have that returning presence in net, it can make up for a lot of blemishes or some weaknesses that you may or may not be returning from the previous season. So you get that returning goaltender back as well, who's played a bunch of minutes, seen a bunch of big games. That's always a nice fallback as well. So you have those 3 key pieces. So with as much as Saline and Chelsea bring back, I also look at the landscape around the conference as well. And you look at a lot of the Ann Arbor schools have, kind of fallen off, trending in the wrong, in the wrong direction the last 2 years. Pioneer, Skyline. Obviously potential to rebound and regroup and improve on what they've done the last maybe year or 2. I mentioned Pinckney as well. That was a sneaky good team in the conference with them co-oping and leaving. That overall talent in the conference, I feel like has kind of dropped a little bit over the last couple of years, which only furthers, that gap, I think, that's starting to develop between your top 2 teams and the rest of the conference. So let's see here. All right, still got 5 minutes, making good time here. Couple players to watch. Obviously, I mentioned Idapalo and Woodrell. I think those are the 2 best players in the conference, bar none. I don't know. I wrote in the conference preview on the website at pdspicks.com. Everything I talk about here will obviously be on the articles, plus more stats, analysis, players to watch, and a whole bunch more at pdspicks.com. So be sure to check it out. But what I said on the blog was, I don't know who's Batman. I don't know who's Robin. But they should be the 2 best players almost every time they step on the ice this season, regardless of who Saline is playing. I do believe that top line for Saline is good enough to play with just about anybody in the state. Obviously, the disparity there when you go up against the likes of CCs and Brightons and some of the top 5, top 10 teams is depth becomes more of an issue. But you want to go top line for top line. I think that Woodrell and Idapalo line will be good enough to, like I said, skate with anybody. And I think, the other part I mentioned Tyler Schroeder as well. I'm excited for him this senior season. I think this year's team for Coach Kyle Zagata has kind of been a long time coming. Several players on the roster who have been there for not just 1, but 2, 3 years. This senior class has been coming along over the last, couple seasons. They know what it's about. They know what to expect. I really think it all starts to come together this season. Really comes down to execution and avoiding those lulls, those letdowns, and just bringing it to the rink every single night. And if they do that, I think this team can be pretty special and do some pretty special things. So, um, Brendan Davila, obviously I mentioned him. He's had a real good fall in the MDHL. I know he was a 18U tournament team kid for them that went out to Minnesota last month. That's no easy feat. That's definitely a feather in the cap for him. Carson Kacharski, I've talked about, he's a name I've known for a long time too. I feel like he kind of gets overshadowed in the conference a little bit throughout, his last 3 years because there's been heavy hitters like Roberts, Ben Wild a couple years ago. Like Kacharski has kind of gotten overshadowed, but my God, like, he had he was one of the top scorers in the conference last year. Huron is coming off their best season in 8 years. So if he can kind of put all that together, Huron ends up having a really good showing there for his senior season. I think they could be a little dangerous as well. And then I gotta mention, I don't know if I'm gonna get all this in. Graham Newton. I have to talk about this kid. Skyline, I mentioned, has kind of fallen on hard times a bit the last couple of seasons. They got mercied 6 times last season. But even in the midst of all those struggles, like, I'm not kidding when I say Graham Newton may be one of the best defensemen in the entire state this season. And I think he's a perfect case study for how to properly navigate the high school landscape. You hear it all the time. Oh, my high school team is bad, and oh, I want to get exposure and this and that. Like, Graham Newton, Skyline, like I said, has had a tough go of it, but Graham Newton is like I said, going to be one of the top guys because of the extracurriculars that he's doing. He was a Team Michigan guy last spring. He's an MDHL kid this fall. I'd expect him to be a Team Michigan kid again in the spring and potentially have junior hockey options a year from now if he wants to go that route. So I just think it doesn't matter where you play as long as you're taking the right steps and the right precautions to continue developing and continue growing. Where you play November to February doesn't completely solidify, one way or the other, like I said. So if you're a kid out there, maybe a smaller known program or the program isn't as don't be afraid of jumping in and being a part of it, because a kid like Graham Newton, I'm telling you, is going to be one of the top 6 defensemen in the state by the end of the year. So definitely want to keep that in mind. I wanted to make sure I got that in because like I said, I think he's a perfect case study for high school hockey kids and a model that kids can follow regardless of what program you play for. And he's not the only one. There's been a lot that have come through over the years. It's just right now I can kind of talk about it in real time as it's happening, as it's unfolding. So Graham Newton, keep an eye out for him and expect him to have a big year as well. Circle this date on the calendar, January 13th. Celine goes to Chelsea, the Arctic Coliseum. Never an easy place to play. It's on a Saturday. I'd expect that barn to be rocking. The whole town might even shut down. So we'll talk about it another time. We'll get into it another time, I'm sure. But I will table the SEC discussion there. A good solid 10 minutes for the boys out of, Lenawee County, Washtenaw County, that whole bit. So it's still a bunch I didn't get to, but that's good. I'd rather have too much than not enough. Okay. So the South Central Hockey League. I think I heard at one point it's the largest surface area conference in the state. Spans the most the largest territory in the state. I don't know if someone can confirm that for me, but nonetheless, 7-team conference may have the most parity than any other conference in the state. And what I mean by that is 5 of the 7 teams last season finished with an overall winning record. So super competitive teams in that regard. And then if you go back through the history books, you don't have to go very far. 4 different programs have won the last 5 league championships. I don't know that there's that much turnover in any other conference that you'll find. So, obviously just programs taking turns almost at who's the top dog. And once you climb that mountaintop, you don't stay there for long because there's other hungry dogs coming. So, um, let's see here. In the other component of it too, 4 programs in 5 years. As I was looking through rosters and combing through kind of year over year data, I wouldn't be surprised if a 5th different program won it this year, to only add to the chaos and parity of the SCHL. Now, Jackson Lumen Christie, 2-time defending champ. They've won it the last two years, and they're returning a bunch. So it won't be an easy task for somebody to dethrone the reigning champs. However, I don't think Lumen's path to a three-peat is going to be the yellow brick road necessarily. I think there's going to be a lot of bumps and challenges along the way. Lumen is an interesting program. I was doing some digging on them, and obviously it's a program I'm very familiar with, even going back to my playing days, my coaching days. I'm a mid-Michigan kid, so like I'm very familiar with Lumen Christie. I would say, even going that far back, probably one of the most dominant mid-Michigan programs of the last 2 or 3 decades. And even if you want to go all the way back to the CAAC, obviously they're the top team in the SCHL now. Their local success is second to none. However, and this is kind of my challenge for the program, is to I want to see them take it to the state level, to the state tournament, and achieving success at that level has been a much different story for the Titans as of late. I was shocked to find that Lumen, unless I missed something, hasn't won a regional championship and made it to the state tournament since 2011. So that's a pretty significant drought for Lumen Christie. Like I said, for as successful as they've been at the conference level and at the local level, playing teams in their immediate area, that statewide success hasn't quite been there. Now, you look at some of the other conference opponents: Cap City, Mid-Michigan, Matawan, Kalamazoo Eagles, even. They've all won regionals. They've all competed at the state tournament, made it to the quarterfinals. Did Kalamazoo make it to the Final Four? I don't know that offhand. But anyways, like I said, I respect the hell out of Lumen Christie. Obviously, that program has accomplished a ton. But like I said, I want to see that kind of translate now into playoff success, into statewide success. The good news is they've got some real nice prospects coming back this year that may just do that. Super experienced on the back end. I've heard nothing but good things about guys like Dan Brady and Luke Sexton. Very unique skill sets and bring a ton to the table. Brady is a big and mobile, very sound defensively. Sexton is shifty, puck mover type with great footwork. So, and again, I was talking about goalies on part 1. My favorite piece of the puzzle, you're bringing back a starting goaltender in Zach Jacala, who played every single minute of action in 26 games for the Titans last year. You don't see that very often. So you got those pieces coming back. Obviously, that's going to set you up for success. Couple players to key in on this season. Max Tyler, I swear I've been talking about this kid for half a decade now. I feel like he should be a senior in college. I've known of him for so long. Super talented kid. The Caps, they do lose leading scorers Drew Agnew, Leo Clement, Brian Motko, which is a pretty significant loss. But I do believe they're bringing in some very promising names, some very promising talent that was acquired over the offseason. So Nice pieces coming in, and obviously Max Tyler at the forefront there coming back. Braden Lewis out of Matawan, again, another kid who's had a tremendous offseason. Real good showing for the MDHL. I believe he was a tournament team kid for them as well. He's just a junior too, so definitely one to have on the radar. A lot of great underclassmen in the SCHL. Braden Lewis, Caden Stasienko out of Portage is another one worth noting there. He's got 61 career points, and he's only going to be a junior. Lumen Christie's Josh Dumont is another junior. I was told he played defense last season. Heard rumors he may be transitioning back to forward, which he is by nature. So maybe making that transition changes the dynamic for Lumen Christie there a little bit. Underclassmen goalies as well. Dumont's teammate Jacala, I mentioned him. Kalamazoo's Owen Anderson, and sophomore Lee Laporte. There we go, out of Portage. He was the only goaltender on Portage's roster last season. As a freshman, played nearly 1,300 minutes and posted a 15-10-1 record. So to get all that coming back, and he's only a sophomore, that's pretty impressive. One game I got circled. How much time do I got? All right, I got a little bit of time still. One game I got circled, February 7th, big matchup between Lumen Christie and Cap City. I do think your conference, your league champion is one of these two teams. However, it's not necessarily this matchup that's going to mean the most. It's going to mean all the little matchups leading up to this. Can Cap City take care of business, on a road trip to Kalamazoo? Can Lumen Christie beat Matawan in a midweek game, handle their business to set up this matchup in February and make this matchup in February the premier game of the season? It's not going to be an easy task. It's not going to be an easy road. In order for this date to be important, both teams have to take care of business leading up to that. You're going to have Eastside, Matawan, Mid-Michigan, Kalamazoo, all presenting challenges. And kids get complacent. Teams have off nights. Can either of those teams face that adversity and come out successful in order to set up that premier matchup there in February? My pick for the conference, this is probably my first real contrarian pick of the conference previews, but I am going to go with Cap City based off of the rumors and potential of some of the players they got coming in and just how talented they might be in a situation where Cap City isn't a rebuild program anymore. They're a reloading program where they're bringing in, they're graduating talent and then filling those gaps with more talent. So I'm going to go out on a limb and take Cap City. Obviously, Lumen is the team to beat. Matawan is such a tough out every night. And I do need to mention this. I got to get this in too before we wrap up. Can't forget, Eastside beat Lumen and Matawan and Cap City all last season, all within a 2-week stretch. So even though Eastside didn't factor in the conference championship there, they very much had an influence by beating other people who were in the hunt. And that was kind of what I was referring to by Lumen and Cap City setting up that matchup. The games leading up to that matchup are going to be far more crucial than that matchup itself. So I think the SCHL is way up for grabs this season. Very curious to see how it unfolds. But I am going to hitch my wagon to the Caps and see how this race goes. Because like I said, I think as many as 5 of the 7 teams could end up as your league champion. So, all right, that was a good stopping point there. I got everything I wanted to get in right under the buzzer. So that was good timing, Petey. Good job. There we go. Starting to get into a good rhythm now as we get into our 6th conference of the previews as we lead up to the high school hockey season next month. Okay. I will mention this too before I get into the last conference. Again, there are blog previews on pdspicks.com that include all the information I'm talking about now, plus even more players to watch, more data and stats on other teams in the conference. So if I'm not giving you enough here on the podcast, you can always get more on the website as well. So be sure to check that out. Okay. I'm going to take one more drink here before we get into the final conference, and then we will go. Ready and start. All right. So the last one on the list for the episode is the Oakland Activities Association. I gotta really think about that acronym as I say it. The OAA. You've heard me fanboy a bunch already about Clarkston this season, and we're still a month away from the season even getting going. I hate to break it to you, probably going to be more of that coming, not just on this episode, but as the season unfolds as well. I've been thoroughly impressed with the turnaround job that Coach Nathan Breyer has done. He put together a 20-win. He led Clarkston to a 20-win season last year. That was more wins than the previous two seasons combined. Not only did he put them in a position to have success, short-term success, you have a really good, class that kind of comes up together. Not only has he put them in a position to have immediate success, but sustained success. That's a lot of S's there. I really had to fight my way through that sentence, but I think this is a program where it should be included in the conversation with some of the blue bloods in high school hockey: Brighton, Heartland, Stevenson, Houghton, TC Central. Like, I think Clarkston is going to enter that chat. I really do. There's nice pieces, obviously, that they graduated last year, good prospects that have moved on. You've got Owen Croston, who I can't say enough good things about. He's got the potential to be the number one player in the state in high school hockey. You want to look down the road. He graduates next spring. Well, guess what? They still got Ronnie Wade to fall back on. Ronnie Wade is an exceptional talent. You graduate him 2 years from now. You still got Brady Damien in that. I think they're here to stay for a while. Last season they took on the likes of CC and Salem and Mona Shores. Those are some top programs around the state, and hung with and competed with, and even picked up a couple wins over some of those teams. You follow that up this season, and they're doing a Thanksgiving showcase with Brighton and Heartland and Forest Hill Central. That's a weekend event of 4 teams where all 4 could be in the top 10 by the time those teams meet at the end of November. So will be a super competitive event in and of itself. And obviously Clarkston right there in the mix, not just from a association standpoint, but also from a statewide standpoint. And as much as Clarkston is trending up, I think the rest of the OAA is starting to trend down a little bit. It's addition by subtraction a little bit, in a way where, other than Stony Creek, it feels like the rest of the association teams graduated a ton of their top performers and key performers from a season ago. So there's a lot of question marks with some of the other teams in the association that aren't there for Stony Creek and for Clarkston, obviously. So the lack of returning threats around the league just kind of further creates that divide between Clarkston and the rest of the group. I will say, though, Stony Creek shares a lot of similarities to Clarkston, in my opinion. I think they're on the same trajectory. They're just at a different stage of the process. I think Clarkston can look at Stony Creek, or how do I want to say this? I wrote it in the blog on the website and I can't remember now. Stony Creek is where Clarkston was maybe a year or 2 years ago, and that Stony Creek can look to Clarkston to where they project or want to be in a year or 2 as an overall program. And I don't mean that as a slight or an insult in any way. I know Stony Creek made the state tournament last season, but I just don't think the Cougars can go into a season expecting to contend at the state level just yet. Clarkston is there. Clarkston should expect to win the conference. Clarkston's goals should be to win a regional, should be to make it to Plymouth, should be to win a state title. Quite frankly, that should be Clarkston's expectations coming into this season. I don't know that Stony Creek is quite there yet. I do think, I think their goal should be to contend with, compete with, beat Clarkston and get over that first hurdle before you start looking ahead and start trying to take on even bigger hurdles down the road. Like I said, making it to the state tournament, making it to Plymouth, and and winning a state title. I think Stony Creek has to clear that first hurdle, which is contending with Clarkston. I want to say I was looking at scores from last season. I think Clarkston beat them like 9-1 or 7-2. Like Stony Creek's focus should be to catch and compete with Clarkston. And then once you've accomplished that, now your focus shifts to kind of that statewide success, that's those state level goals. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything there. Um, I talk about those hurdles and kind of steps along the process. Um, it's good to have those goals and good to strive for a regional championship, a state title, but none of those goals happen, in my opinion, unless you can compete and skate with Clarkston. Because if you can't skate with Clarkston, you're not going to be able to skate with other teams that are there at the Elite Eight, at the Final Four. So that's what I mean is aim small, miss small, make Clarkston your first goal. You achieve that hurdle, you move on to some of the other hurdles down the road. So players to watch. I am on short time here a little bit. I mentioned Owen Croston, obviously has the potential to be a really high level junior player this time next season. I didn't realize Ronnie Wade led the association in scoring last season. As a sophomore, had 59 points. So maybe one of the only leading scorers in the conference to return from last year. I don't know that I've seen any so far in my research where the returning scorer from a season ago is back this fall. Speaking of underclassmen, Charlie Price, big fan of him. Definitely a name to know. He's just going to be a junior. Very unique skill set. He's not going to wow you. He's not going to razzle dazzle. But by the end of the night, when you check the score sheet, he will have very quietly put up 3, 4, even 5 points on any given night. So I think he's another one who's got junior hockey potential if he so chooses. Could land in a variety of spots, but I think he would be an extremely valuable third, fourth line guy at the next level. And that's no diss. I think it's actually a huge compliment to his type of game that he plays. Not everybody projects to be a top. Very few project to be top scorers or top playmakers at the junior hockey level. You need those role players. You need those guys that are willing to block shots, that are willing to kill penalties, and play those scrappy style of games that not everybody's made for. And Charlie Price is made for that type of game. So I do think he's one definitely to pay attention to. I got to go quick here. Carson Cadgigal, MHA guys have spoken very highly about him this fall. He's had a real strong offseason. And let's see here. I did mention Lee Laporte from Portage as a returning goaltender in that sophomore class. Brady Damien is another one I got to mention amongst the class of 2026. He's got a chance to really be a standout here. I do think it'll be a bit of a timeshare in net for Clarkston, but ultimately Damien is going to play on a really strong team against some big matchups. He's going to have a chance to really solidify and make a name for himself in that sophomore class. So he's one I want to pay attention to as well. Division champs, I should say. I'm going to go quick. Obviously, no surprise here. I'm going Clarkston. I'm going Stony Creek. There's no real big surprises there. I will say, though, M1 United does return Charlie Price. I mentioned him. And getting juniors Zach Steiner and Kyle Passwater back. I think Passwater was an MHA kid, too. If he wasn't, he was definitely at tryouts. But so there's a lot of returners there that, again, a lot of the rest of the league doesn't have. But the question will be, well, there you have it. The question will be, I'll finish my sentence. They're going to be going up against top-notch offenses in Clarkston and in Stony Creek. And the question there will be defensively, will M1 United kind of have enough to neutralize that or give themselves a chance if it turns into a track meet? So Okay, so that was it for our second edition of the high school hockey conference previews. Let me see. I don't know if I can pull up my list for who I have next week. Do I have this on short order? I'm not sure that I do. Hang on, if you bear with me, I just might be able to pull it up. I only have like a million documents that I have to go through in order to find it. So this shouldn't be that hard. I only have 75 windows open. And if it's not this one, I might. Oh, all right. It's always the last place you look. Okay, so next week's episode, I will have the Big North, Saginaw Valley, and the Metro League on tap. But also keep an eye out for the bonus episode I'm looking to throw out later this week on specifically on the MDHL showcase. So again, as I said before, like, subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Any errors, anything you want to call me out on, any other players you want to talk about, teams I'm sleeping on, whatever it may be, feel free to reach out and let's talk some hockey here as we get closer and closer to the start of the high school hockey season. So, with that, as I leave you guys all every time, skate hard, have fun, and I will see you guys at the rink very soon.